Pulling on the leash is one of the most common problems that dog owners struggle with. It is also one of the most misunderstood and critical issues that owners need to correct in order to gain respect from their dogs and begin to change their dog's overall behavior. A dog that pulls believes that it is leading you. If you let your dog pull on the leash, it will have a detrimental effect on all other areas of your relationship with your dog. In order to gain trustworthy off-leash response, you must first have zero tolerance for pulling in any situation, no matter how many distractions are present. Too often, people will correct pulling during what they consider a training session, but later they let their mind slip to other things and they allow the dog to begin pulling again. This teaches the dog that there is inconsistency in the owner's attempt at leadership. This inconsistency will become a problem when the owner attempts to begin training for off-leash control under distraction. Correcting pulling is a fairly quick process with the average dog and can usually be accomplished in about 5 minutes, but don't worry if it takes you a bit longer. Attach your 10-foot freedom training line to your dog's command collar. The goal here is not to keep your dog held tightly in a heel position, but rather the opposite. In this exercise, you are simply trying to keep the dog from pulling on the training line, regardless of how much distance there is between you and the dog. It is not necessary to get the dog to stay on one particular side either. All you are trying to do is get the dog to follow you in whichever direction you are moving. As you walk, if the dog begins to pull, using both hands together on the training line, step back slightly and give a short, sharp snap on the collar. Immediately continue walking after the correction. Your goal is to have your line remain loose at all times. As soon as you feel tension on the line, you know that your dog is pulling and requires a correction. When you're about to change direction, first say something to your dog to communicate that you have made a decision to alter your course. You can say something like, "This way, over here," or "Let's go." You do not need to say the dog's name every time you talk to him. He will figure out very quickly when you are speaking to him. Speaking to the dog first is an important part of training the dog to listen to you. The dog must be given the opportunity to avoid correction by listening to you. Do not turn suddenly and correct the dog without warning. This will cause the dog to be unable to relax on his walk with you. Your words, followed by a correction only when needed, will cause your dog to respect you when you speak. After a few corrections, your dog may begin to try different things to get you to stop correcting him. He may become very vocal. He may fall behind and try not to walk with you anymore. He may throw himself on the ground like a sack of potatoes and lay there hoping you will stop your corrections. These are all common responses from dogs that have been allowed to become stubborn or spoiled in their relationships with human beings. You need to be prepared for your dog's various antics and be unwavering in your approach so that he knows you will not cave in to his resistance. Do not feel sorry for your dog if he resists you and needs to be corrected. Once he realizes you will not be swayed and that you are expecting him to continue to follow you, he will accept the new way of walking. There is the potential that your dog may become aggressive toward you in his effort to get you to submit to him and allow his pulling to continue. Your dog could act aggressively even if you have never seen this kind of behavior from him before. If this happens, you want to muzzle your dog before proceeding. This will help reduce the dog's tendency to resist and threaten you, and it will protect you from potential harm. A muzzle is like a saddle on a horse for the first time. Your dog may initially fight the muzzle, but he will eventually accept it, allowing you to continue the training exercise. When you stop walking, do not tell your dog to sit. It is not necessary. At this point, you are trying to create a casual environment where your dog just generally stays near you whenever you are standing still. What you will probably find, though, is that your dog will begin to sit automatically out of a newly found general respect for you. It is important to realize that as your dog approaches any type of distraction, his desire to pull will most likely increase. In this case, the firmness of your physical correction must also increase. Otherwise, he will learn to ignore you whenever he is tempted by other influences. Once your dog realizes that no pulling whatsoever is acceptable, you are ready to begin imitating off-leash control. Drop your long training line and, using your voice and the clap of your hands, direct your dog to follow you. As you approach a distraction, stop your forward movement and simply tell your dog to wait. If he continues to move forward toward the distraction, pick up your training line and give your corrective snap. Drop your line again. Repeat this corrective process, increasing the firmness of your collar correction until the dog will not move toward the distraction. Your dog is intelligent enough to realize that you are not holding on to the training line, and he may test you to see if you can still maintain control now that he has an implied sense of freedom. After a few corrections, though, your dog will continue to follow and stay near you. But this will happen only if your corrections have been firm enough to make your dog choose loyalty to you rather than running off to satisfy his own desire. When you are ready to walk away from a distraction, speak to your dog and clap your hands as you walk away, expecting the dog to follow your body language. If he does not follow, go back to him, pick up his line, and snap it in the direction you want to go. Once he is following you properly, drop the line again and continue walking. Your dog may hesitate the first time you ever drop the line as he feels the slight drag from the line. You have just taught your dog not to pull at all, and now he is being expected to drag the line. This is why it is important to use a lightweight line such as one of my Freedom training lines. Encourage your dog to overcome any hesitation he may feel by bending slightly, clapping your hands as you continue to move forward, and speaking to him with positive tones. Many people make the mistake of shortening up on their dog's line once they have made a correction. This is an almost subconscious response, as if to say, "You have been a bad dog, now I will restrict you." What you want to do is correct the dog and then allow him to have the same amount of line that he originally had. The goal is to teach him to be respectful of the distance you have given him without the fear of losing it. Using my command collar will quickly correct pulling on the leash with the majority of dogs. However, if you are struggling with a dog that is an extreme puller, use a metal prong or pinch collar. This collar will give a stronger bite to initially discourage the behavior. You can then revert back to the command collar once your dog has consistently become a bit easier for you to handle. Just remember that there is never an acceptable excuse for your dog to pull on the leash. Being strict with this will positively affect all other areas of the relationship with your dog and set you on the fast track to having your dog listen to you when he is off the leash, even when there are distractions present. The leash should remain loose at all times. A sharp, short corrective snap is given with the training line and command collar if the dog makes the line go tense. Basically, the line between you and the dog should never be straight. It should always have a dip in it. The dog should not be held tightly at your side. Remember, this is not a heel command, but rather a casual walking exercise. Allowing the dog to be ahead of you does not mean that the dog is not respecting you, as long as there is absolutely no pulling on the leash. To correct a dog from pulling should only take about 5 minutes, as long as you increase the firmness of your corrections each time the dog pulls until he decides that it is no longer a wise thing to do. You may find that your dog, when you start to walk with it, whether it be a puppy or an older dog that you've just attained, they may not want to walk on a leash. And they may do a number of things. They may dig their heels in and just hold back, what I call muling. They may rear up and try to fight you or try to fight the line. They may attack the line and pull at the line. But this idea of holding back and resisting, most people will stall at that point, not knowing what to do. What I do is I maintain my forward momentum, and I keep encouraging the dog, and I say, let's go. I'll be making short corrective snaps on my training collar as I move forward, even with the dog who has decided to throw himself on his side on the ground, thinking that if he just lays there like a sack of potatoes, he's got your system beat, that you will not know what to do, you won't be able to go forward, and the dog wins. No matter how much squawking and screaming the dog does in this defiance of moving forward, you just keep going and saying, let's go. Keep making your little snapping corrections. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. And eventually what's going to happen is the dog's going to realize you're more stubborn than they are. And they're going to stop squawking, they're going to stop resisting, and they'll just start coming with you. And then immediately you throw in your, attaboy, good dog, here we go. And then when the dog comes towards you, you bend over and you pet the dog. Do not stop. When the dog throws itself on the ground or resists you in any way, do not stop and stand still and try to get the dog to come to you and beg it to come to you, because the dog is staring at you, realizing that he has stopped your momentum by his stalling. So you've got to keep moving, keep making the corrections. In maybe 5-10 minutes, the dog is going to get up, realize that nothing they're trying is working, and you will have a successful walking exercise happening. I want to really stress at this point how important it is that we are never going to allow our dogs to pull on a leash ever again for any reason. I tell this to people so many times, if I do a session with someone, and I will stress again at the end of the first hour that it is not acceptable for the dog to pull ever again, and I ask them if they understand this, and they say, of course we do, Don. Yes, we get it. And I'll say, I'll see you tomorrow. They walk away to their car. They do not get halfway to the car, and the dog is pulling again, and I'll watch them, and I will have to jump in and say, your dog is pulling? And they're like, oh, right, yes. Because people tune out. They don't understand how necessary it is for complete control off leash that we do not allow our dog to pull ever on the leash. This is why in the first 5 minutes of our training when we're walking with the dog that we need to increase the firmness of our corrections until we get the dog responding even under distraction. When they will not pull under heavy distraction, we can then a few minutes later drop the training line, our long line, and walk past those same distractions, and the dog will not go and respond to the distractions because they are respecting the corrections we gave them in the first few minutes. So it is imperative, if we are wanting to have off-leash control, that we do not allow the dog to pull for any reason. So in the last 3 steps getting to your car, in the last couple of steps coming back from a walk to go into the home, or in the few steps just before you go out the door, you got to watch for all these things. You see your neighbor across the street who the dog just dearly loves. As you walk up to the person, the dog is restraining itself nicely with the dipped leash. And the last few steps, the dog can't control itself, it seems, and it pulls. If you allow that and do not correct that, you are saying to the dog ultimately, when you strongly desire something, I will let you go. I will let you break free of my control and do what you want to do. We must be absolute sticklers about this pulling on the leash issue if you want to have confidence that your dog is not going to break commands or leave your control when it's off the leash. It is not necessary, and it actually is detrimental to the process, to have that dog walking right beside you, and especially when people are holding up tightly on that leash. They've seen these types of things on television from various trainers, and it is not going to help us in this process of trying to gain off-leash control. You must give the dog the loose leash so that they learn to respect the boundaries that you have given them. They are then deciding to keep that line loose because of the consequence that is associated with pulling. And when they are respecting that and deciding to do this of their own accord, we then can move down the stages towards true off-leash control. If there's more than one person in the family, remind each other, encourage each other, watch each other, so that you are always aware that there's no pulling on the leash. It's the subtle things that the dog is getting away with that ultimately lead the dog to challenge you more and undermine the overall control that you're looking for.